Hey guys, I've tried to record this video like 10 times. It's hard to fit everything in just because there's so much to cover, but I'm probably just going to try hit dot points and just keep talking crap. But anyway, starting the actual point of the video is my theory for how the mechanism of action of how minoxidil grows hair. Now, it's pretty much, if you do your own research on minoxidil, you'll find out pretty quickly there's not much known about it. The mechanism of, especially how it grows hair, isn't known. The exact mechanism of how it works as a blood pressure medication isn't known. Yeah, we'll start from the start and just go through. Pretty much two parts will be firstly the side effects and how I think how that works, and then essentially towards the end I'll go through the reason why I think it's all relative to one of the side effects. Okay, so starting from the start would be heart. So obviously this is the main one. So palpitations, lower blood pressure, etc. It's a vasodilator, antihypertensive medication. And how this works, I'm not too sure. It's not my main concern in regards to blood pressure. Obviously, I used it for cosmetic reasons to grow hair, but from my research, it looks like it acts as it hypopolarizes cell membranes to widen blood vessels, and it possibly does that by working as a potassium channel opener. Now, obviously, there's a whole bunch of stuff there that could go wrong and cause a whole lot of issues if it's, modulating that kind of stuff within the body. But myself, I didn't really have issues with my heart. I definitely had palpitations, but once I stopped the medication, it went back to normal. And it has a pretty good safety profile in regards to the heart. It's obviously very toxic, so in rats and so forth, it was causing cardiac lesions on the atriums and so forth. Like I mentioned in my previous video, it kills cats pretty much straight away because they can't filter it out of their body. But with human pathology, there's been no reports of any cardiac lesions or anything like that. There are people online who state that it induced heart issues, like very serious heart issues. But moving on from there would be skin. So skin, the dryness, flakiness. I just relate that back to the inactive ingredients. So that would just be the alcohol in the product. Again, not my concern. And then moving on to the other underreported rare side effects. So I believe these are all relative to each other. Now, firstly is hirtuism, which is essentially, for instance, women taking minoxidil, they'll start growing beards and so forth. This is one of the key components to kind of how my theory came together. Second is pseudoacromegaly, which is also relative to my theory as well. And essentially that's when the pituitary gland dysfunctions, or I'm not sure if it's the cases that have been reported, if it's like a permanent dysfunction or it's just because they keep taking minoxidil, but essentially the pituitary gland starts producing too much growth hormone, which results in essentially the body keeps growing, so hands and so forth getting bigger, and going from there to essentially what the reason why I'm making this video now, which is sexual dysfunction. Now, as I mentioned in my previous video, I've had sexual issues, neurological issues, and physical issues, connective tissue issues, etc. Now, with pretty much again with the mechanism of how how minoxidil works, it did some searching. So I had to go quite through. I've searched quite a few studies and so forth, just to try and get answers. And yeah, it's not much, but I'm pretty happy with my theory. But essentially, as I mentioned before, the most reported mechanism of it working is that it allows extra blood flow to the follicles, which just doesn't make sense to me. Any blood pressure or any stimulation of hair follicles that increases blood flow should then, in theory, work, which scientifically we know it doesn't. There's only two drugs that work scientifically, and that is finasteride and minoxidil. Really, nothing else is really shown to have 100% positive effect of regrowing hair. There's individual cases, obviously, in vitamins and so forth, but yeah, they're the only two, FDA approved ways. Not that I trust the FDA. But yeah, they're all the side effects. Now, moving on to the sexual dysfunction. So, I obviously did a lot of research into this, and I've also got a lot of experience previously taking finasteride. So with that, I took finasteride. By the second day, I was completely impotent, and yeah, over the next month, I gradually tapered off, and I recovered 100%. Now, a big issue, yeah, so with sexual dysfunction, there's a whole bunch of drugs that essentially are that can cause the same issues I'm going through and what other guys who have sexual dysfunction induced by minoxidil are going through. Now, your main ones are obviously your anti-androgens, so finasteride and saw palmetto, the ones inhibiting 5-AR reductase. So remember that, 5-AR reductase, which is your DHT. And then you've got your other drugs, which is SSRIs and Accutane, so PSSD, post SSRI sexual dysfunction, and PAS, post Accutane syndrome. Their mechanism of why they induce sexual dysfunction, again, isn't known. Much of neuroscience isn't known. Again, yeah, there's no cures for the Gehrig's or dementia or anything like that, just because neuroscience hasn't, it's just not at that level yet. And I don't really ever see us finding an answer for why these syndromes and so forth are, why we're susceptible to this damage, or what's actually the concrete reason of what's actually happening within the brain. But I'm pretty confident saying anti-androgen, androgens are obviously a real thing, and they're being studied pretty closely. But again, neuroscience probably isn't going to give us an answer. And it's the same with drugs as well. Like you don't know how a drug's going to react, and you don't know. There's just not enough information there. Like, it's all trial and error. But essentially, yeah, the most popular theory is that that I've read through is that like with PSSD, it's more in regards to serotonin receptors and so forth dysfunctioning, and that's why I lack a libido. And but again, it could be a whole brain chemistry thing. It's the brain is a whole functioning thing. One spanner in the works, and it could throw everything out of whack. Again, we don't know. We can't see what that looks like. But basically, I believe minoxidil works on the androgens. Now, whereas finasteride and saw palmetto acts as an anti-androgen and inhibits DHT, I think minoxidil works as a pro-androgen and possibly as an anti-androgen, just off the studies I found, which I had to, a lot of research. But essentially, this I kind of linked everything together from watching a video of a guy who was taking finasteride, and he was annoyed that he wasn't growing a beard. So, his hair came back, his hairline, fully, was growing back, and he was getting his hair back. But he's like, oh, it's so annoying that I can't grow a beard. Like it doesn't, grow a beard. And I was like, huh, he's right. It doesn't, it'll regrow weak hair follicles by inhibiting DHT, 5-AR reductase, but it doesn't, grow hair. Like in this, it gets to the root cause of why the hair's dying, but it doesn't actually, give life to the hair follicle by any means. And that's when it clicked that one of the main side effects of minoxidil is hirtuism, where, women and so forth are growing beards, and men are getting hairy backs and hairy arms and everything like that. I was like, that is just two totally different mechanisms of how the hair is coming back, or regrowing, or coming to life, or however you want to put it. And then basically I was doing research on the mechanisms of how it does regrow hair, and I saw a study basically saying that in the hair follicles that were the study was undertaking, there was a 40% increase in the enzyme 17 beta hydroxy steroid dehydrogenase. I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but I'm just going to shorten that to 17B HSD for the point of the video. So basically in the hair follicles there was a 40% increase of 17B HSD. Now that essentially is the enzyme responsible for testosterone. Now with that, keep in mind that your 5A reductase, or 5AR, is a byproduct of 17B HSD, as essentially testosterone gets converted to DHT. And if you're predisposed to weak hair follicles, that is essentially what causes male pattern baldness. Over time, essentially the DHT kills off the hair follicles, and that's why men go bald and women start thinning, etc. So that was a really good find. And then from there, I was like, oh, okay, so essentially it's giving life to the hair follicles. Now, again, this relates back to the mechanism of action. I was like, huh. And so, yeah, it's completely different to how finasteride works. And that's when I started researching hirtuism. And as soon as I even looked that up, the first thing I found was that hirtuism is actually caused by an increase in the enzyme 17B-HSD. So I finally found a direct link, and it made a bit of sense. And that is that essentially, the same enzyme was essentially, increasing the production of, the increase of the enzyme within the body was the reason why hair follicles were, starting to take on more androgenic effects, and thickening up and so forth. So I finally found a direct link, and it clicked, and that was great. And then the actual study within the hair follicles that were being treated by Minoxidil, essentially just showed it was giving life to the hair follicle rather than addressing the root cause of why it was dying. And they found that, basically testosterone, estradiol was increased by 40%, and then DHT was decreased. So whether you view that as that it acted like an anti-androgen, or that it was more just balancing out the hair follicle and giving it life and putting the correct, giving it kind of balancing out the chemistry of the hair follicle. Clearly, it has an effect on androgenic properties from the study, and the fact that it induces hirtuism, exactly indicate that to do that it has to have an effect on androgens. Now, to support that as well, basically I have my previous experience with finasteride. So, as mentioned, I was impotent by the second day on finasteride. I tapered off, I recovered 100%, but it clearly shows I have susceptible androgen receptors. Now, that's an anti-androgen. Now, with minoxidil, if it was acting as a pro-androgen, and essentially increasing the enzyme 17B-HSD, not that I'm sure how the mechanism of how it's increased, but I'm sure it does. I'm not sure how that increase happens, but it definitely does if that's why it's inducing hirtuism. But essentially, it would be that so if it was increasing the enzyme and enough of that was circulating with, not just in the hair follicle, but you applied enough systemically and it was circulating with the body, that would, start taking an effect. And with me, as opposed to finasteride where I became impotent and started having sexual issues straight away, I actually became hypersexual. So I became extremely hypersexual. Like I needed to 4 times a day, 4 or 5 times a day. I was like, yeah, and then just cut out, just completely crashed. And I've read quite a few other guys who are on minoxidil as well who are like, yeah, it increased like my sex drive and so forth. So it's again clearly another direct link to androgens, and that it's again my theory acting as a pro-androgen. But if you're susceptible, you've got susceptible androgens and so forth. You throw a spanner in the works, everything could go haywire and mess it up. So thirdly, so we've got hirtuism, hypersexuality. Thirdly is TRT. So quite a few guys who have had issues with sexual dysfunction induced by minoxidil. I think 2 or 3 guys have reported they started testosterone replacement therapy, TRT. They're on Clomid, HCG, and so forth, and they actually, fully recovered. Again, direct contact is hard to make, as this was just off the Ask a Patient website and I think Reddit. So I don't know, the effect, but essentially they reported full recoveries. Now, if you're supplementing testosterone, clearly that's an androgen issue, and if they were able to correct that, and that was their cure, that clearly shows that they've essentially rebooted the system, that was their cure. Now, same with post-finasteride syndrome. Sometimes TRT works, sometimes it doesn't. Majority of the time it doesn't, but it does look like out of a few hundred guys, it did work for a couple, and that's I'd say kind of the same ratio for post-finasteride syndrome. It works for a few, but it's more of a receptor issue, and if the receptors are stuffed up, then it's it just depends on your level of damage. And lastly, it would be speaking about the level of damage. The guys I've spoken to, some are completely impotent. So 5 years later, they still can't even maintain an erection, zero libido, just nothing. Myself, I have slightly recovered sexually, so I have my erections back and my semen quality is slightly increased and so forth. And sometimes I feel, I'm not even going to say I have libido, but essentially, if I do take androgenic supplements, and if you're familiar with post-finasteride syndrome, following the CD Nuts protocol, or the Swole Source protocol, all things plants and medicines and so forth, they can pretty much a whole bunch of stuff out there. It's either pro-androgenic or anti-androgenic. So food can be anti-androgenic, such as sugar and so forth, where like chicken breast would be pro-androgenic, and walking is pro-androgenic, where weight or anti-androgenic, where weightlifting. It's basically anything you do has an effect on androgens, and that's why I heavily believe minoxidil just has a heavy effect. Now, with that, I was taking androgenic supplements, so L-carnitine, pine pollen, and I saw an effect. Obviously, the damage is there, but I definitely see an increase in function in regards to like the blood supply down there, and semen quality, and even a little bit of libido. So it definitely has an effect. So putting that all together, you've got to connect it to androgens, hirtuism, hypersexuality for me. Testosterone replacement therapy has shown to work, and then also androgenic supplements have an effect. Again, this is case by case basis. Some guys report androgenic supplements work, some don't. Again, very similar to post-finasteride syndrome, pretty much matches everything. And it just depends on the level of damage and how susceptible you are and so forth. With me, I recovered. I'm not cured by any means, but I have recovered, what I have so far within about 10 months, and it's kind of gradually happened over time. Again, that kind of falls in line with post-finasteride syndrome. Two last things I want to touch on is connective tissue issues. So again, with post-finasteride syndrome, there tends to be, there's complaints of connective tissue issues, and a side effect of minoxidil that you might see come up is collagen inhibition. So there's quite a few things online in regards to why wrinkles and stuff so forth start appearing. 17B HSD is directly linked to aromatase, which is estradiol and estrogen and so forth, which is production of calcium and collagen, I believe. To me, this is another direct link that this is how it's affecting androgens. Essentially, if those receptors have been affected or something like that, again, everyone's different. It just depends where your susceptibility lies. But if it is blocking that aromatase, which if the studies definitely suggest it has an effect on those enzymes that relate to that, then it totally makes sense to me why how that would be inhibiting collagen. The last thing I just want to mention as well is pituitary issues. So as I mentioned, pseudoacromegaly, where growth hormone and so forth. It's all linked to the pituitary gland. So whether it's I definitely think it's a receptor issue in regards to androgens, which obviously are generated from your pituitary gland. With me, I had full hormonal panels done, and pretty much the only thing that came back weird was my prolactin was 1,000. So if you get a prolactinemia, I think it is, or pituitary gland tumor, your prolactin will start going crazy. So I had my prolactin tested, and the max range was 400. Mine was 1,000. I had it retested, and it was back to normal. Retested again, 800. Retested again, it was back to normal. So it clearly shows it was like freaking out or something. But I had that checked out. My pituitary gland is fine, but I think it's actually affected the receptors within there that has caused a freak out. Again, this is a very common theme with post-finasteride syndrome, is high prolactin, which has been reported with minoxidil users as well. So I put this all down to a receptor issue within the androgens, which is controlled by your pituitary gland, and coming from that, that all stems, that's all in relation to pseudoacromegaly, excess growth hormone, plus hirtuism. I 100% think, and I'm 100% confident in saying that minoxidil acts as some kind of pro-androgen, and definitely that's how it regrows hair. However, its mechanism is obviously very different to finasteride. So pretty much to summarize everything up, I think that pretty much covers everything. But pretty much advise that I would say, if you're familiar with post-finasteride syndrome or the CD nuts protocol or swole source, jump on that straight away. For me, that has helped a little bit. It's hard to say whether this is permanent damage to the receptors or if it's just down regulation or up regulation. With post-finasteride, some guys recover after a couple of years, and they do so by either upregulating their androgen receptors, or possibly they just need time to heal or helping them heal. But that's pretty much. I'll link all the studies down below, and just to touch on the last thing would be neurological issues. So if you do throw us, the human brain's a machine. You throw a spanner in the works, everything will go haywire. So even though I've had pretty intense neurological issues such as visual snow syndrome and tremors and muscle spasms and everything like that, you throw a spanner in the works, I'm not surprised I've developed some neurological issues. My main concern is obviously the ramifications in the future, but by connecting this all to androgens and being healthy, I think I can accept what's happened or get back to some kind of normal. I don't know. Who knows? I'll probably wipe 30 years off my life, or maybe, I don't know. But it's I definitely think possibly there's an effect on blood vessels and stuff as well. But for me personally, I think it starts with androgens, and all side effects I've had in regards to sexual, neurological, and connective tissue and physical have I've found them all to be reported in post-finasteride use as well. Not as significant, but they're definitely there. But I just wanted to summarize that. I think I've covered everything, and if I come up with anything new, I'll definitely bring it back. But yeah, thank you.